I've got good news and bad news. The good news is these are all my notes for my drash. The bad news is this is 3 semesters worth of notes for me when I teach. So kick back and relax. The drash that I'm going to be giving today is part drash and part experience and part kavanah. Excuse me. Trouble with being mic'd is you hear everything. The kavanah is leading up to what I consider to be the absolute pinnacle of Rosh Hashanah, the Grand Aleinu. It's a little bit of an oxymoron because the Grand Aleinu is the time where we prostrate ourselves in front of the ark. And I'm going to give you a kavanah that's going to encourage you to do that. There's lots of room in the sanctuary where if you feel like you would like to, when we get to V'anachnu korim, when we bend the knee, V'hishtachavim, and put our faces to the earth, I'm going to encourage you to do that because in my mind, there's just absolutely nothing more powerful at that quiet point of divine connection. So our theme for these Yamim Noraim, these days of awe, has been, why am I here? And Rabbi Emily set the bar very high in dealing with, why am I here? What is the heart in the kol halev, in the voice of the heart? And others have spoken to us about why am I here in the existential sense of what's my purpose for being on this planet, in this place, at this time. But I want to deal with, why am I here? Not me, Stephen Silverne, or me, Rabbi. As Rabbi Emily pointed out yesterday, Yom Kippur is about losing our roles, not clarifying our roles. It's divesting ourselves of all of the, for lack of a better word, schmutz that accrues to us simply because we take on a particular role. And this day gives us an opportunity to press the reset button and move away from those roles and ask, what is my authentic self? I'm going to use the word authentic because real, for me, has to do with facts. And self is not about facts. It's about feeling. Nobody can tell you how you should feel or ought to feel. You know how you do feel. You have your authentic feeling and you have your authentic self. And yet, on this day, we say, Ashamnu, Shachatnu. We are guilty. We have sinned. So how does our authentic self connect to the we? We are in a state of finding that original core of being. Rabbi Michael Steinfeld wrote a beautiful drash on Yom Kippur, because in English it typically gets translated as the day of, right? Look at it differently. At, O-N-E, one, meant. The day of at-one-ment. Getting in touch with that authentic self. Now there's an old custom that says in one pocket you should have a little bit of a note that says, for me, this universe was created. And in your other pocket you should have a little note that says, I am but dust and ashes. Now, a few years ago, I was given this nice little token by a colleague of mine, Rabbi Mark Novak, who has a community in northern Washington. And it has both, one on each side. That to me is really, really profound, because this is at one minute. I am both the reason that the universe was created, and I am dust and ashes, inseparable one for the other. And the thing that really strikes me is that the universe itself is but dust and ashes, even in its vast grandness. So in trying to answer this question, what is my authentic self? We're faced with a real conundrum. And the conundrum is this. We experience that we are, in fact, interrelated. We are connected, not just to everyone in this room, but we are connected with thoughts and ideas and people and events in ways that we can't even begin to imagine. It is a complex connection to the extent that we look at the evening news and we wonder, boy, what's going to impact me today? What's going to upset me today? Right? We have that kind of connection, and yet at the same time, we experience ourselves as completely self-contained, shut off from everything else. I'm me. Nobody can tell now I'm my mother-in-law. You can't tell me what to do, or my brother-in-laws. Right? I am self-contained. You know, there are entire states that take this to the extreme of, we're not going to accept any federal monies because you can't tell me what to do. Right? And we call that freedom. I'm not going to get political here. I just wanted to. There's this, but I am. I can't help it. It's part of who I am. It's part of who Bill is. I would be not authentic to do this. Yet, we're not like Lego blocks. Right? When you take a Lego block and you put it in with a system of other Lego blocks, try and extract that one Lego block out. You can't do it. We're more fluid. We opt in and out of relationships. Granted, some relationships are more fluid than others, but we still opt in and out of various relationships. Arthur Kessler had a really fine image for this. He brought the idea of the holon. I have it written down here, and it's very disturbing for me because in Hebrew, in Israel, there's a wonderful little town called Holon. And it's spelled the same in English letter, but hold on, is the idea that we are at one time individual and part of something bigger than ourselves. That becomes an important piece. Right? We are individuals, and yet at the same time, we are part of something much bigger than ourselves. And there's a Jesse Jackson in me that wants to say, I am somebody. You are somebody. So you are an important piece of that which is much bigger than you. I want to briefly touch on a book that I read some 40 years ago. It was a tiny little novella that was written by a mathematician and a theologian. It's called Flatland, a romance of many dimensions. I highly recommend, if you haven't read it, I really recommend this book. It'll take you about an hour. It's really very thin. It was written 1892. And in this book, he explores the notion of dimensions. And what he identifies for us is that if you were an inhabitant of a world of particular dimensions, it becomes very easy for you to see the dimensions that are lower or fewer than you. In other words, we live in three-dimensional space. And so it's very easy for us to imagine two-dimensional space, flatland, and one-dimensional space, line land, and we could even imagine a no-dimensional space, point land. But in this novella, he goes on to show that it's very hard to imagine dimensions that you can't experience. In point land, in no dimension land, you can't experience lines. And so you have no concept of that. And the same for flat land. Well, if it's true for point land and line land and flat land, that they can't experience the dimensions beyond, how much more so for our three-dimensional space? How radical was it for us that maybe 20 years after this novella, Albert Einstein brought what used to be a measurement into a dimension, so that there is now the possibility of a dimension of space and time. That you can experience, that different people going at different speeds experience space differently, and I can't even go beyond that. Right? That fourth dimension. And only 40 years after that, we have a whole set of theories the quantum physicists have now laid out for us, a whole set of theories of another 8 dimensions. I have difficulty wrapping my mind around spaces, time around a dimension, but another 8 dimensions. These are dimensions that we do not yet have the ability to experience. Now, all of this is important when we get to the notion of self. and the relationship of self to something greater. Okay. I made a little note to save you from me going on for 3 semesters. So, there is a component of self that is, as Sam Harris says, we all have this narrator in our heads, and the narrator is constantly making up a story and telling us that story, and we listen to that story. But we don't have to listen to that story. There is a space that is accessible to us that shuts down the story and allows us to be a more critical observer. It's sometimes called the place of non-duality, the place where everything is its oneness. There is no other. Everything is completely and intimately connected, which then places a unique responsibility on the self when you step out of non-duality. I'm going to do a very brief exercise with you and hope that it succeeds in helping you get a very brief experience of non-duality. Now, I'm going to ask for your cooperation in this. In order for it to work, you have to kind of go with me, all right? So you have no reason to trust me, but I'm the rabbi, and so let's go with it. This is best done by closing your eyes. So if you feel comfortable, do that, please. Close your eyes. And now I want you to take a look inside yourself. You don't have the eyes to see it, but you can sense it. Sense inside yourself the smallest part that you're able to feel. Whether that is your throat constricting, whether it is the thump of blood through your veins, whether it is your heart beating, whether it's your lungs expanding, sense that. And try to take a look at that sensation. And now I want you to expand your sensation so that you're not focusing on just that one thing, but you're focusing on your entire body. You're feeling your body in relation to space. You can feel your body on the bench. You can feel the floor beneath your feet. You feel the temperature of the air around you. You hear my voice. And now step back just a little bit and see yourself sitting in the pew in this room. See yourself clearly. Now, if you've succeeded in doing that, you just experience non-duality. And it's a bit of a shock to know that by looking at yourself separately from yourself, you are entering into the non-dual. You're entering into that space of oneness. And that's the space that I'm going to encourage you to enter as we go into the Grandulator. But there are three things that I want you to bring with you into the Grandulator. The first thing, Shema Yisrael. That breath of life that some people call Adonai and some people call God is the powerful force of the universe, and is non-dual, one. We are all part of that force of the universe. Some will call it nature. To me, it goes beyond nature because there seems to be dimensions that we briefly experience that we can't put our fingers on, we can't put our eyes on, we can only sense it emotionally. And that oneness, in that oneness, v'ahavta et Yah Elohecha. Love that oneness. B'chol levavecha, with all your heart. Uv'chol nafshecha, with all your soul. Uv'chol miodecha, with all your might. Love being in that space of complete connection, of non-duality, of oneness. And from there, the next part is v'ahavta l're'achacha kamocha, and you shall love your neighbor in precisely the way that you love yourself. And as Rabbi Emily pointed out last night, there is a self-love that you have to accept in order to be able to love that neighbor. And there's one last thing that I want you to bring in, and that is a statement from Hillel that you all know. You all know the story. If I say to you, on one foot, you could all take that prompt and tell me the story of Hillel and the stranger who wanted to convert. But the Torah had to be taught to him while he stood on one foot. That comes not from the Torah, it comes from Talmud, tractate Shabbat. And in preparing for this, I looked at that particular page, and what I saw totally amazed me in regards to oneness. That entire section, that entire story comes to us in Hebrew, which is not totally unique in the Talmud, but whenever something comes in Hebrew, you know that it was brought in from another place. It was not part of the mindset of the Talmud, but came from another source. So this whole section about Shammai and the convert, and Hillel and the convert, and what happened is in Hebrew, right until you get to the key line of the story. And the key line of the story is in Aramaic. And it's not in regular Talmudic Aramaic. It's in an Aramaic that is unique to a portion of Babylon from which Hillel came. Right? It was such an Aramaic that for each and every word I had to look up the precise meaning in my Aramaic dictionary. It was that kind of Aramaic. That which is hateful to you, do not do to others. And I immediately said, what's going on here? Why do we get this whole story in Hebrew? And then Hillel says, one of the most important pieces of Torah that we have, that which is hateful to you, do not do to others. And he says it in this highly unique Aramaic. And I searched to see what other people thought, and the answer that really landed with me came from the Orthodox Union, which is completely surprising to me. And their answer was, Hillel was woke before woke. He took the language of this stranger. He heard the Hebrew, and he knew from the Hebrew that Hebrew was not this person's language. That this person's language was this particular form of Aramaic, and so that he could speak directly to his heart and be one with that person, he spoke in the language that was most direct. Yeah, wow. And so, we're going to go into the Grandulator. And the kavanah that I'm going to ask you to bring into it is awareness of this universal power. Try to connect. Love your neighbor. Try to connect. Be woke. Care. Connect to care. And then because we reconstruct Judaism, any other idea that you invented in this past 25 minutes. This is your personal time. We're going to do the Grandulator. George has promised me that he's going to do Ve'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim umodim very, very slowly, so that for those of us who want to really prostrate ourselves, have the time to do that. While you're there, connect. And then when you hear Ya'aleh, we rise.